really is good to be here, because when you look at what's going on in Baton Rouge right now, we have some of the worst traffic in the United States. Really, the statistics prove it. We have some of the worst traffic in the United States. We have to sit in traffic an average of 47 hours a year is the average amount of time we spend wasting in traffic in the capital region. 47 hours. And so one of the reasons I wanted to come up to Shreveport is because I wanted to see what a loop looked like, because they've been trying to get those in Baton Rouge now for so long that I didn't know what they looked like. I wanted to see what they were. And up here we have 2 of them. But I will tell you, after driving around them several times, they get boring. So they're not that much fun. But the other thing is that up here in North Louisiana, I want to see what our congressional district's going to look like in the future. Because the coast is eroding in Louisiana, and at some point, we're going to be all the way up here with the way things are going. So I want to make sure I spend some time here. But lastly, at Baton Rouge, you have the legislature meeting, and obviously a lot going on there with the legislature meeting. You have Shreveport, you have casinos, and so I had to decide, Baton Rouge with the legislature meeting or Shreveport casinos. It doesn't really matter. Either way, we're all going to be losing money out of our pockets. All right, so what's going on in politics right now? What's going on? You look around the United States and you see this incredible attention being put toward Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and people like Bernie Sanders. Y'all feel the burn. But it's this big anti-establishment sentiment that's out there. And why? What's going on? Why are people so frustrated with government? And I'll tell you, after being in Congress for a year, I think it's well-deserved sentiment based on the dysfunction up there. But you can look at the majority of voters, and they're looking at anti-establishment candidates, people that are going to go stir things up and make fundamental change to what's happening in Washington. Why is that? One thing is, when this nation was first founded, we had 2.5 million Americans. 2.5 million. When the Constitution was signed, we had 3.5 million Americans. And today, we're using this same government structure to govern this country that has 320 million people. I'll say it again. The nation was formed, we had 2.5 million. When the Constitution was signed, we had 3.5 million. We have 320 million people living in this country today, and we're largely using this same structure of government. People are frustrated because the solution for New York isn't the same one as for new roads. You can't go out there and develop these uniform standards or uniform solutions. People are frustrated because solutions are being imposed on them versus solutions being locally grown. And I think that's the heart of frustration. Look at what's going on right now with our federal budget. First of all, completely absurd. Completely absurd. Right now, the debt of this country has exceeded $19 trillion. Each one of you taxpayers own $160,000 of that debt. I want to be clear. If the debt's due today, your individual share of that is $160,000. It's completely irresponsible, completely selfish. And those of you that may have children or grandchildren that are being born or are very young right now, $1.2 to $1.4 million is the share of that national debt that has occurred prior to their being born. For what? What is so important, so great that government's spending money on right now that suggest we should be imposing those types of debts on our country, on our citizens? You look at Louisiana, you look locally. We've lost 25% of our energy workforce, our oil and gas workforce, in the last 14 months. 25%. That is virtually all of the employment loss that's been in this state. Nearly 12 or 13,000 people over the last 14 months. Nearly all of it is applicable to losses in oil and gas. And on top of that, we now see where the federal agencies are trying to impose a $10 a barrel tax, 30 to 40% tax on the barrels of oil, which is going to further challenge our ability to produce energy here in Louisiana. You also look at the fact that you're seeing these regulations that are being put forth, like Waters of the U.S. or the WOTUS rule. Let me remind you of something. The state of Louisiana drains from Montana to New York to 2 Canadian provinces. All that water comes right down and funnels through our state. You can't apply the same rules in Louisiana as you apply in Arizona. Yet that's what they're trying to do. And it's going to drive up cost of development in Louisiana, not in Arizona, here. There's literally a provision in the rule that says that they could have jurisdiction over areas that drain rainfall. That's my front yard, and they're not coming there. You also look at what's happened with flood insurance rates, something that has gone up so much, exponentially increased in some areas. You look at this flood risk management standard. I saw a map of St. John Parish recently under this new standard, where the only area that's actually where this new standard wouldn't apply is effectively the levees. Everywhere else, you could potentially lose the opportunity for investment in federal funds. I don't know what solution they're trying to fix, but it's crazy. There's an ozone rule that was put forth within the last year and a half. Literally the most expensive federal regulation in U.S. history, projected to exceed over $1 trillion in compliance cost. Let me flip it over for just a minute. If you go back to the energy crisis we had after Arab oil embargo and the tanking of energy industry and everything here in Louisiana back in the 1980s, you remember that, and you remember people here that were going bankrupt and people that lost their jobs and people that were leaving. We could have this same crisis right now if that's what we chose to do, but it's not. Look at what's happening here right now. We have $144 billion worth of economic development projects that have been announced here. $144 billion. It's more than the entire state of Texas. And if you look at the job creation, the job growth that results from all that investment, we're looking at nearly 12,000 jobs, or nearly offsetting all that job loss that we've had. What's different about this time than last? Let me tell you what's different. Number one, we recognize that Louisiana is one of the top producers of energy in the United States, that we can take advantage of low prices and actually supply manufacturing industries to come to locate here in the United States with these low energy prices. We recognize now it's an opportunity for us. There's not another state in the country that has the availability of energy, that has this extensive energy pipeline network, that has one of the most robust maritime transportation systems in the nation, right here in Louisiana. And the examples are incredible. Bentler Steel right here in northwest Louisiana. In northeast Louisiana, ConAgra, each one of those are 600 jobs being created, low energy prices, and having access to maritime transportation. In central Louisiana, Revolution Aluminum, 1,400 jobs are investing $2.4 billion. Extraordinary opportunity. In Acadiana, you have CG&I, 400 jobs located there. In the river region, Formosa, $9.4 billion and 1,200 jobs. Again, energy, maritime transportation system. In southwest Louisiana, and you got to hand it to you guys, unbelievable what's happening there. Right on the Calcasieu River, and just two projects, $40 billion with Sasol and Cheniere. $40 billion in investment going into that area, 1,600 jobs. But you know, it's not all tied just to the energy and to the maritime transportation system. We're seeing a diversification of the economy here now, not just this industrial revolution. Software companies, like in the Capital Region, the IBM project bringing in 800 jobs. IBM locating a software center. High-tech Louisiana. How many people would have thought of that back in the 1980s? Again, the CGI software in Acadiana. GE Capital in the New Orleans region, 400 jobs. Again, another IT-related jobs in that area. Things are fundamentally changing. We're diversifying it. We're not laying around saying we're going to take this one on the chin. We're fighting back. And here's one of the most amazing things. When you go talk to those companies about where they were going to locate, what they were looking for, this wasn't a situation where Cheniere was trying to decide between Lake Charles and Alexandria. They weren't trying to decide between Lake Charles and somewhere in Texas, Lake Charles and Mississippi or Alabama. They were looking at Louisiana versus Mexico, Louisiana versus Brazil, Louisiana versus India, Louisiana versus China. And you know what? We won. We won over and over and over and over again. $144 billion worth of economic development projects under construction or on the horizon in Louisiana. And I'll tell you something. We don't have those kind of wins by fighting against one another, by being partisan. That's not how you have the wins. These projects, when you go back and you look at the strategies, we won them because we worked together. Parishes worked together, recognizing that there were opportunities for symbiotic relationships. Regions worked together. We all came together across party lines, across parish lines, across regional lines to make sure that Louisiana won. And we've got to continue that strategy. You know, the Lieutenant Governor's Office, the Department of Tourism, they kicked off a new initiative maybe 2 years ago. And it says, the Atchafalaya Basin, America's foreign country. And I love that tagline. That's right there in your area. And I love that tagline, but you know what? That's not the Atchafalaya Basin. Y'all have traveled outside Louisiana before. It's Louisiana. We're America's foreign country. You don't have a place anywhere else in this state, in this nation. Nowhere else in this nation do you have the unique culture, the food, the family, the way of life. It doesn't happen anywhere else. It's Louisiana. And on top of that, how amazing is this place? We handle right here in our state 20% of all the maritime commerce for the whole country. We have the largest tonnage port in the Western Hemisphere, 5 of the top 15 ports in the United States. We're one of the top 3 energy producers of both oil and natural gas, and incredibly, 1/3 of all the energy for this nation is either transported, produced, or refined right here in Louisiana. One of the largest industrial corridors in the world, top commercial seafood producer in the continental United States, and one of the top recreational fishing destinations in the nation. Just to say a few. This place really is amazing, and it really is special, and we really are blessed. Whether it's the river, the energy, the seafood, we're blessed here. And we've got to continue working together and taking advantage of those opportunities to win, because we're competing with the world. Now, I'm in Congress, and like I said, I've been there for a year. We've got a part in that too. And one of the biggest challenges that we've had in this state has been infrastructure. Whether it's roads, it's levees, it's dredging the river, it's been a big challenge, and it's, in some cases, it's strangling our economy or preventing our ability to grow and lure economic development projects here. You know, years ago in the State of the Union, our president said that he wanted to double exports for the United States, wanted to double them. A very, very aggressive goal. And they got together with all these companies and all these CEOs, and he let them come up with all these recommendations. And they talked about marketing and outreach and all these things they were going to do. And you know what? Here, 5 years later, the due date came. They didn't come anywhere close. Nowhere close to hitting that goal. You know why? Because they didn't make investments in our infrastructure, in helping to deepen our rivers, maintain our ports, invest in port infrastructure. That's how you facilitate global trade. You know, Louisiana, with our maritime transportation system, the only state in the country that has access to 31 states. 31 states. When you put something on a barge, it's the most efficient, the most inexpensive way of getting it there. It's no comparison in cost when you try and put it on rail or truck or obviously an airplane. We're blessed here, and we have some strategic advantages, and we've got to use them well. So in Washington, when I went up there, I fought to get on the Transportation Committee because I wanted to make sure that we had representation as a new highway bill was being developed. And being in the room and working together with the other members of our House and Senate delegation, we were able to negotiate a $500 million, a $500 million increase in funds for the state of Louisiana. We were able to add a grant program where that program will provide up to $800 million in the early years and $1 billion beginning in 3 years for mega projects, for large projects that cost over $100 million that are needed. The 220 exit up here in this area. A new Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge. a new I-10 bridge in Lake Charles, LA1 in Lafourche. Let's finish I-49 north and south. There are a lot of things that we need to do. And so those monies are going to be there. Now we also, having some good mentors over the years and having worked for folks like Senator Breaux and Tozan and some of the people that are real, I think, legacies in our Louisiana delegation, we were able to add some provisions to that grant program and said that, that states that are really important to our national energy security shall be biased in their direction for them. As you know, again, Louisiana being a top energy producer. We were able to add language in there that says when you have mobility issues like a funneling of traffic, like in Baton Rouge, where you have I-10 or the interstate system dropping down to one lane, the only place in the United States, you get a prejudice for those types of projects. We were able to add provisions that said when you have projects that integrate different modes of transportation, like going from maritime transportation to rail transportation to highways, you get prejudice for those projects. Again, Louisiana, one of only 2 states in the nation that has all 6 Class 1 rail lines, the port system, the interstates we have here. So biasing things for us, not against us, as we've seen so many times historically. And also adding provisions that let us do some really neat things, like taking traffic technology several generations ahead. Traffic lights were developed and invented in the 1920s, yet it's still our dominant form of managing traffic. When you drove here, you might have punched in on your Google map or your Waze app and said, hey, I'm trying to go to the hotel or the convention center. And it told you how to get there. Well, you know what? Those phones can communicate with traffic lights. And under this bill, we added a technology program to where you can begin communicating with traffic lights and let them know, hey, traffic lights, you got 32 cars coming here in 17 seconds, 4 of them are turning right, 12 are going straight, the rest are going left. And you can begin managing your surface traffic much more efficiently instead of sitting for minutes needlessly at a traffic light when no one's going in the other direction. We can take advantage of technology. Some real wins in there for Louisiana. We also had wins for those of you in South Louisiana. For those of you that may like to fish, we were able to extend the boundaries of state management of our red snapper fishery, not to 3 miles, but all the way out to 9 miles, and getting the federal government out of our business with their distorted management practices and trying to tell us that we're low on red snapper whenever their stock counts didn't include counting the number of red snapper around reef areas. The only problem is red snapper are reef fish. Sort of important to count around reef areas. So the state's in control now. We were able to develop a new FEMA bill that just passed through the House last week. That bill now says that instead of being reactive and coming in and spending billions of dollars after a storm or hurricane or tornado or flood, we're going to start leaning forward. We're going to go in and identify vulnerabilities and figure out how to make areas more resilient on the front end. And for those of you that just experienced tornadoes, and I'm very sorry for you and the families of the victims across the state. I know we had devastation in St. James Parish, in Livingston Parish, in Assumption Parish, in Gonzales or Prairieville area, in Ascension, Kenner, and other areas. And instead of setting these really high bars for when FEMA and federal assistance and federal agencies can come in and help, we added a provision that says when there's severe local implications, you can have access to federal resources. And we also said, from those of you that have constituents that dealt with the repercussions of Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita, with FEMA now coming in and saying, you need to pay us back for that money we gave you to elevate your homes and other investments, which is well over $100 million that FEMA's trying to take back from grants that they already awarded and did it under, where FEMA is now trying to change the rules and retroactively say, you're not complying with our new standards. You can't do that. And we put a provision in the bill that says FEMA's not touching the money. We've got some wins and our delegation's working on it. And some things we're doing leaning forward are working on the National Flood Insurance Program. As I noted earlier, rates have skyrocketed as a result of action they did in 2012 where they tried to move to this actuarial process. There's nothing actuarial about the rates. They're robbing people, they're devaluing homes, they're stealing people's retirement by increasing the rates to the degree they have. I'm all for people paying what they owe, but they are using distorted calculations. And we just formed a caucus this past week with Republicans and Democrats from Louisiana and other areas to develop an entirely new path forward on how our flood insurance program works. We were able in December to lift the oil export ban, a 40-year ban that's been in place that prevents the United States from being able to export our oil. I'll say it for the third time. Louisiana is one of the top oil and gas producing states in the nation. And with these low prices, we are experiencing extraordinary impacts to our workforce in the oil and gas industry. But if you give us access to foreign markets and let us sell our oil across the border to other areas, to other countries, let's help increase the United States' role in global energy policy. Let's help decrease the role of OPEC and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Russia. And you know what? If last year, if the State Department and John Kerry is out there saying that they want Iran to be able to sell hundreds of millions of barrels of their oil on global markets, but at the same time saying we can't do it in the United States, that's not okay. And we were able to beat that back and repeal that ban in December to where we can have access to those global markets. And we're going to continue working together as a delegation in Washington, Republicans, Democrats, House and Senate, to make sure that we put Louisiana first, to make sure that we continue having those wins and continue making sure that we get Washington out of the way. Because the reality is, I'll say it again, this nation started with 2.5 million people. When the Constitution was signed, there were 3.5 million. It's 320 million people today, and this centralized system doesn't work. We've got to delegate authority much closer to the problems. Otherwise, as you go through these various layers of government, you end up with solutions that are no longer applicable to the problem by the time they get up to Washington and come back down. The authority, the control, the funding, the resources, it needs to be at the local level. You need to be playing the leading role. You're the closest one to the ground. You know the pulse, you know the solutions. And it's going to be the most efficient way we can run our government. And so, while I know that most of you join public service for the pay, y'all need coffee. I want to say that I really do appreciate the fact that y'all are public servants, that you are on the ground dealing with the day-to-day problems. And I want to say that our interface, the way we need to be working together, it needs to have no gap. We need to be communicating and working together on a daily basis and putting Louisiana first and not allowing solutions to be forced upon us from Washington in search of problems. And I'll say that our office is absolutely available at any point in time. And I'm not running for Senate. I'm very happy where I am. But we want to work with you, and we want to work together to continue putting Louisiana first, to continue ensuring that we see a different outcome in these low energy prices than we saw last time prices were where they were. Thank you very much.